Welcome to the My House Podcast, a show about the past, present, and future goings-on at the My House Youth Drop-In Center in Wasilla, Alaska, with your host, Michelle Overstreet. Welcome to episode 11 of the My House Podcast. I am not your host, Michelle Overstreet. I'm Isaac Smolden, the production manager here at My House. Michelle is out this week, and so I will be having a conversation with someone who is the first guest on this show, actually, all the way back in episode 1, Mr. Michael Carson. How's it going today, Michael?
Great. Thank you for having me.
So we had talked initially in episode 1. It's episode 11 now, and there's just so much new stuff going on with the Opioid Task Force and everything. We figured it'd be good to have you back on and discuss that a little bit. Before we get started, I will just cover some housekeeping things. The 22nd of July, that's in just a couple weeks now, we have the 18 Holes for Hope golf tournament out at Settlers Bay. There's still room for teams. There's a couple sponsorships left for the holes might be gone, but I think like the putting competition, you can still sponsor that. So if you're interested in that, there's QR codes all over town to scan. There's QR codes at Settlers. I believe you can also access it through our website as well. So be on the lookout for that. We have on August 31st, I'll remind everyone again, and it's something that me and Michael are going to talk about, but that is the International Overdose Awareness Day, right, Michael?
Correct. And then also the following day, September 1st, is National Recovery Month. So we're actually rolling both of those events into a one-day event. Last year we had a two-day event, and because the Alaska State Fair won't be open this year on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, we decided to go with August 31st as a single event day.
Okay, so be on the lookout for that as well. We'll continue to remind people about that. Here in the building, still Christmas in July at the boutique. Come on down and check out some of the deals that they are offering. I actually forgot regular shorts yesterday. I only brought gym shorts to work, and so I had to buy a pair of shorts from the boutique. They're really nice. They're high-quality shorts. Come in and check those out. Iced tea at the cafe, a couple new menu items as well. And yeah, come down and see us. It'd be nice to see everyone. So, okay, I think that covers housekeeping. So I will just segue us right into our main topic. And I guess, Michael, we might as well start with continuing to talk a little bit about International Overdose Day. What are some of the events that are going on there? How many years have you been doing it? Just give me some of the details on that.
Yeah, great questions, Isaac, and appreciate the opportunity to inform the public about August 31st and International Overdose Day. We have been recognizing that for the last few years. It actually started in January. January 10th was the day that Kelsey Green, John Green, who is a task force member and also a board member at my house, Kelsey died in the Anchorage jail due to heroin withdrawals. And so we were having candlelight vigils on January 10th, and we still do here at the My House site. And then the last couple of years, we decided to also have an event during the summer. Last year, it was at Wasilla Lake Park, and Karen Malcolm Smith brought out a cross display that was very, very powerful. People could write names on white crosses and hammer them into the grass. We read over 300 names that day. And then the following day, September 1st, National Recovery Month, we had vendors, Senator Dan Sullivan, a huge supporter of my house and the Mat-Su Opioid Task Force, attended and spoke. Dr. Ann Zink, the medical director for the state, spoke. So we're hoping to recreate that again this year. And this year we have a handle that bacon is 100% better than drugs. So we're going to have a bacon cheeseburger barbecue that day.
That is man, I mean, that's a good enough reason to show up just for that. I mean,
I'm right there with you. And I want to give a shout out to Melissa here at my house. She's going to head up the food train. That day, since we're rolling both of those events into a single day, we're still going to have vendors, and we'll still be acknowledging names. John Green is asking parents that have most recently lost a child due to, we're in the third phase of this opioid epidemic, and we're in the fentanyl crisis stage. First, it was OxyContin introduced by Purdue Pharma that ended up rolling into heroin because people weren't able to get their scripts. And then now, unfortunately, we're in the fentanyl crisis. And I always refer to heroin. We showed a video, an FBI DEA video called Chasing the Dragon. We showed that at a number of task force meetings, a number of high schools. But I refer to fentanyl as the beast.
Yeah, I want to get into the kind of this phase 3 of the crisis, because it's something we talked about at the polysubstance meeting that the Opioid Task Force put on a couple weeks ago that I attended. But before we get into that, I remember passing Wasilla Lake last year and seeing those crosses, and even for someone that didn't attend the event, I thought it was powerful just as a reminder and as a visual for everyone that was driving along the side of the highway. But this year, it's not at Wasilla Lake. Is it at Nunley Park, just right here by the building?
Yes, it is. And the reason we decided to have it here, Isaac, is obviously the park will allow us to have a place to have vendors. But then we also want to do a small dedication to our memorial garden out here. You may know that there was an Eagle Scout a number of years ago. His name is Ben. He came out with his grandfather and a dog, a golden retriever, Scout. And I, in fact, actually saw Trent out there watering this morning. And also for people that haven't seen that little memorial garden, be a great opportunity to swing by. We also had the opportunity of a former board member, Holly Getline, that constructed, and it's out there in the middle of the memorial garden. It is a metal sculpture. And I believe the theme might have been Here Comes the Sun. We're always, the Mat-Su Opioid Task Force is always leaning into hope is in the air. And so by having this one-day event here at the My House site with the Memorial Garden, we're looking at maybe, we haven't, like I said, John is soliciting some names or ideas about acknowledgement, if people want to read names again, if we want to look into paver blocks, if we'd like to have some names scrolled on the monitor in the cafe. That's John's call. The Mat-Su Opioid Task Force wants to be responsive to the community and how they want to how we respectfully acknowledge those names. And then again, vendors will be out there. We've already had a number of people that have stepped up that want to be vendors over at the park. And then obviously bacon cheeseburgers.
Yeah, bacon cheeseburgers. I mean, that's got to be the big sell, right? The garden looks great right now, too. It's been so sunny that all that stuff that's right by that sculpture here right in front of the parking lot. I mean, it's just exploding right now. It looks really great. Maybe before we move on really quick, for people that are interested in becoming vendors or want to help out and reach out, what's a good way to do that and get involved with that event?
Great question. James Savage, the co-chair of the Mat-Su Opioid Task Force, and is currently over at True North Recovery. People can contact me, and then I could forward their names on to James. So my email is my last name with an S, Carson's. All the folks in the family use the same email, at mtaonline.net, and then I can direct those vendors to James. He's coordinating that, and James is also going to be the MC that day. And so I have personally reached out to Senator Lisa Murkowski And the reason behind that is because of Bruce's Law. Bruce's Law is a federal amendment to the opioid action plan at the federal level, and it is specifically addressing fentanyl. Also, as a side note, Karen Malcolm Smith's cross display that you saw that you thought was very powerful, she is actually going to be having that in Anchorage at the Lusac Library the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. That's the weekend after, or the first weekend, in September. So she's going to have that event in Anchorage with that display, and that is a very, very powerful display. You also mentioned the community cafe, which you participated. I appreciate your attendance. Yes, and the topic was polysubstance, and what that means is intentional or unintentional use. So that might be someone, in a situation where they have, taking some Xanax to be able to sleep or something like that. They're really struggling and they can't seem to, fall asleep, so they take another one. Unintentional would be something that could possibly be contaminated with fentanyl. And possibly what I mean is everything. Heroin, cocaine, meth, everything is contaminated. We have counterfeit pills that are contaminated with fentanyl, 4 out of 10. We're talking Percocet, we're talking Xanax, Oxys, even Adderall. So
yeah, and this was, because we were looking forward, and now this event was a couple weeks ago. We're looking back at what the task force put on, and I was at this event for my house. There's been a lot of news coverage, especially recently, with Molly, with Oxys, people that are making these homemade pills essentially and using pill presses to make them look like they are a substance that they're not, and really they've just been either cut with or are just straight up fentanyl, and it's leading to a lot of overdoses from people that maybe didn't think that they were at risk at all. And then the other thing is we have people that are on medication or maybe they've been drinking, hanging out with friends, and they're not thinking about the possible effects that combining some of these drugs can have, or maybe they don't even realize, like you said, that they are in fact combining substances and how dangerous that is.
It is, Isaac, super, super dangerous. I call it opioid roulette. As I mentioned, the DEA, they have a great awareness program called One Pill Can Kill. And you're exactly right that these pills are crudely pressed but look exactly like the real deal. There isn't any way that you could look at them visually. The only way, Isaac, that you can truly know if there's fentanyl present is that we have fentanyl test strips. However, you have to realize it's kind of like a cookie cutter kind of thing, chocolate chip, where if you crush the pill and you drag the fentanyl test strip through it, it'd be like dragging it through a chocolate chip cookie. You might miss the fentanyl. So what you have to do is you have to dilute it in water so that you can get an accurate reading. And the fentanyl test strips have great directions called Safe Dance. They tell you how to test heroin, even tells you how to test meth. It's a little more complicated testing meth, but since we're talking about, and I mentioned meth is probably the most dangerous out of everything and the most drug that is creating overdoses in the state of Alaska in combination with fentanyl. I'm holding a 1 gram packet of Splenda. I always carry this around just in case I have the opportunity to share it with the audience.
Well, it's a shame we don't have the camera set up. We're going to have to describe the packet of Splenda for me. Yellow,
yep,
red, white,
yellow,
blue.
probably maybe an inch, wide, 2 inches long. Splenda packet that you might find at any restaurant there when you grab your coffee. This holds 1 gram of Splenda. If this was 1 gram of fentanyl, this would kill 500 people. Now, if we had a fork and we drove a fork through it, just the amount of fentanyl that would fit on the end of one fork tine, not all 4, but just 1, 2 milligrams, is fatal overdose. Unfortunately, the latest data from the governor's office, and I have it in front of me here, 60% of youth have not heard about fentanyl, and 40% that have don't even know how dangerous it is.
Wow. And I mean, it's prevalent because I think it was by March the state had seized, law enforcement had seized enough fentanyl in the state of Alaska to kill like 3/4 of the population or something.
That is correct.
I mean,
that is just one bust. But I would have to caution everyone, that's the one bust that got busted, meaning
right. There's way more of it out there.
There is so much of it out there, and some of the audience might have remembered in this past March, Mat-Su had 7 deadly overdoses. However, there were 21 emergencies, and none of those people ended up in the hospital. They just bounced and, ended up somewhere else.
And I mean, that's a quick reminder for people that want Narcan kits or want to be Narcan trained and get Narcan kits is that we are distributing them here from the building. Like I went to an event this past weekend and I had 2 of the new ones on me with the 8 milligram doses for fentanyl, just because, I was carrying around my backpack with me all day and you never know when you would need to call on that. It's just something that I like to keep around on me at all times because you don't know when someone is going to overdose, especially when we're talking about where we have people that are not trying to even take substances laced with fentanyl or not even trying to take an opiate, and it's just there.
And I'm glad you brought up the 8 milligrams because the former kits only had 4, and they had to just this past March, we were able to get the naloxone that had 8 because we needed a bigger bang for our buck. Basically, I don't need to get into a lot of, neuroscience, but there needed to be a stronger naloxone antidote to knock the opioid off of the receptor for the brain to send the message to the receptor for the body to start breathing again.
I mean, isn't that's terrifying to me, just that there's a chemical substance that can just stop your body from being able to tell it to breathe. I mean, I don't know about you. I don't really think about breathing a whole lot. It's one of those subconscious things that I expect my brain to be able to take care of. And yeah, I mean, Narcan really is a miracle drug. And speaking of, how it works, and also earlier you were talking about how we have 60% of our youth that haven't even heard of fentanyl. I know that the task force has been working with the school district to try to bring awareness to that. Could you touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, thank you. That's an important aspect of this. The Mat-Su Opioid Task Force has 5 top priorities, and one of those is upstream primary prevention. I am all about pulling people out of the river of addiction to get them into detox or treatment, but there's something to say about moving upstream and cutting off the flow. So with that in mind, a number of years ago, I composed Kelsey's lesson after Kelsey Green, as I mentioned earlier. And it talks about the science of addiction. However, it focuses on 3 topics. We're talking about tolerance, dependence, and addiction. And as I think you were part of the conversation, it's been about 2 weeks when the Mat-Su superintendent, Dr. Trainey, dropped by, and we all got to share the different task forces that operate out of my house, may that be Justin Pendergrass and Suicide Alliance or Stacy Yates with sex trafficking. So I shared with him Kelsey's lesson, and he was going to take it back to his associate superintendents, and he responded that they are planning to use that. And that's just Isaac, I wrote that lesson some probably 3 or 4 years ago when we were in the middle of the first and second phase of this. So I had to write up an addendum. Actually, there's 3 addenda. One of them talks about specifically fentanyl and all the data, current information about fentanyl, because that was not included in the original lesson.
Well, and it just wasn't as much of an issue back then, if it was an issue at all. I mean, I don't remember.
It was not on the radar.
A word about fentanyl until maybe just within the last year and a half.
Exactly, and it has exploded. And the reason it has exploded is we haven't talked about the idea of the huge profit margin that is involved with drug smuggling.
Yeah.
Starting with China in labs, some of it going to India, then ending up in Mexico, just the raw product. And that's where, when you mention these crude presses, they are not cleaning up anything. Everything is contaminated.
This is something I get asked about a lot, and that it's a pretty simple economic concept. We talked earlier with the Splenda packet and with the fork, imagery. Fentanyl is such a powerful drug, and I get asked all the time when I'm talking to people about how all of these substances are just being laced with fentanyl. And people go, well, why would they lace something, a product with something that is going to kill X amount of the population? I mean, we are talking about a ton of overdoses. And, it's not that simple. They're not trying to kill off the population that is actively using fentanyl. What they're trying to do is dilute a product with a bunch of crap and a tiny, tiny little bit of fentanyl, because that is all it takes to produce the necessary amount. And when you're only using a tiny amount of a product that's easily accessible, it cuts your costs by a huge exponential amount. And what that means is these people that are manufacturing these drugs upstream as it works its way down and then into the population, they're saving so much on their production costs that they can afford to lose X amount of their using population. One, because they don't need to keep these people around to continue to provide them profits. Their margins are already going to be way up with how much they saved. And two, because they are reasonably confident that they're going to have new people entering the population at a rate that is going to continue to grow their profits. And like you said with the cookie analogy, it's not so much that their dosage of fentanyl per parts of whatever they're diluting it with is wrong. It's that if it's not mixed properly or if it's contaminated, that, you have 6 pills that are fine. It's the right, and I'll use right in quotes. I don't think there's any right amount of fentanyl, but it's the right amount of fentanyl to not kill the user and to achieve what they want to achieve. But there's that 1, 2, 3 pills where, for whatever reason, it got more fentanyl per parts of whatever else they're diluting it with. And that's where we have these issues with the overdoses. And like you said, it's not like these are super sterile, clean environments. They don't have to worry about it being super sterile and clean and making sure they get the exact right amount every time, because it's actually more worth their time to just continue to make pills, to not worry about safety, and to just mass produce this as quickly as possible, because the amount of time and the amount of money they're saving using fentanyl is worth losing however many users to overdose.
Those are great points. And another thing that we need to realize is that Michael Troster, who is head of the high drug intensity trafficking area for this area, he always reminds everyone that there are no safe pills on the street. The only safe pill has to come directly from a doctor or a licensed pharmacist.
And even then, you need to do your research and make sure that you know what you're putting into your body and what the effects are, and that you're using those, safe pills responsibly for what they are designed to be used for.
Well, that is a great segue, Isaac, right into the YBRS. Some of your audience might be aware that that is the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And I have that data right in front of me. And there is a question that they ask under drugs. Have you ever misused or used an opioid script differently than prescribed? So we have about 15% of the population using youth that are using opioids, and they're misusing them.
And let me cut in really quick. 15% that is comfortable reporting that they're misusing, because even though it's an anonymous survey, it's safe to assume that not everyone is going to be honest on that survey about the fact that they're misusing opioids. So 15% that is reported that they're actively misusing an opioid.
Yeah, I need to go back and correct that. I want to make sure that I have accurate information. First of all, Isaac, this information is coming from 2019 because we have not there. It's the survey is administered every 2 years. So we haven't had one most recently. But what I need to do is I need to go back and make sure the audience has the correct information. It's actually 8% of the school district students that have reported misusing pain medicine.
Okay.
They changed it in 2017. It just said medication. 2019, they changed it to pain medication. But the high end, meaning, the 8% is an average, but the high end is 10%.
Wow.
So, and like you mentioned, those are the kids or youth that actually answered the question honestly.
I want to play, this is tying back into your work with the school district, and I want to play devil's advocate for just a moment, because I'm a little more recently removed from high school than a lot of people.
Especially me.
And, I interact with high school and school district teachers on a regular basis since both my parents were teachers and my mom is still in the school district. I just want to ask, what makes this lesson so important to be mandated in the school district? What is your argument to teachers for why this needs to be taught in our school district?
That is a great question, and I wanted to thank you bringing up the mandate. We are involved with an attorney that is helping us draft the mandate, and the mandate is it's not a heavy lift. It's a no-brainer for me that we mandate 1 hour each year of what opioids do when they enter the brain. Basically, in adolescence language, I like to use hack and whack. Basically, it rewires the brain to where what happens is that becomes the supreme use and value for the individual is the continued use of opioids. I believe that the reason for the lesson is to provide youth with accurate, honest, and the most current information so that they can make choices that I believe will keep them safe, healthy, and thriving. You know as well as I do, Isaac, that, and I'm going to use some language here, I don't want to offend anyone, youth have a great bull radar.
Absolutely. And that's why I bring this up, is because we have so many of these, and not so many, but, there's already mandated trainings in the school district that we're required to go through for high school. And so to some people, I think tacking one more onto that is why is it worth it? What's the priority? But if you think about it in terms of those numbers,
I'm going to cut you off right there. The priority is to save lives.
Absolutely. And,
right there.
And so we're talking about those numbers of nearly 10%.
Right.
And so if 1 hour you have a classroom with 30 kids. That's 3 kids in your classroom on average.
Right.
If a 1 hour training is enough to discourage and inform our youth why this is so dangerous, and you could save 3 lives in 1 hour by getting upstream of this issue, I would argue that that's worth the time investment.
Another thing is we have to remember there are some numbers out there, some data that say that high school seniors, that 50 to 60% have reported using illicit drugs. So we have kids out there that are using, but then we also have a percent that aren't. I believe it is imperative to provide the information for all of them, but also the ones that aren't, Isaac. I believe we need to reinforce what I refer to as refusal skills, not if they are presented with drugs, but when they are.
Absolutely.
And then have a personal refusal skill that they own, that they can pull out of their back pocket and do a pushback and a statement as simple as, I'm obligated to my family, I'm obligated to my career, I'm obligated to my health, I'm committed to a life second to none. They need to be able to have that immediately. And then can you imagine how powerful it would be if kids are in a group, someone comes up, offers them, and then this one individual is able to make that statement, how that could help pull the other ones in to say, yeah, this is the right thing to do. Because we know one pill can kill. This could happen at a party where kids are drinking and somebody shows up. And you were mentioning, the crude press. There was some oxys that were tested, and there was no Oxycontin in the pill at all. It was binders and fentanyl. Then, I mentioned Adderall. Adderall is a huge drug that is medicated or used to help some individuals deal with hypertension.
And a drug that is hugely misused.
Absolutely. As well. I hear from kids that they're wheeling and dealing Adderall at school. I won't say all the time, but it's there.
No, and I can speak from personal experience that I've seen. That might be the one prescription drug I've seen misused the most is Adderall.
Right. Because it's basically speed.
Essentially.
Right.
Well, Michael, we're up against the clock here, and this is a ton of information, and I want to thank you again for coming on. Maybe just to wrap up, if people want to get involved, you talked about the Opioid Task Force part in working with the school district and putting on these events. Just what's the best way for people that want to get involved and to reach out and help our community face this crisis?
Again, people can email me at carsons at mtaonline.net. People can call me 907-315-4988.
Giving out your phone number. That's bold. That's bold. Hopefully you're not swamped. Although knowing you, I think you'd be perfectly capable of handling a wave of phone calls. That's your bread and butter.
Well, unfortunately, Isaac, ending this podcast is most of the phone calls I get, unfortunately, are parents that have lost children. And they're looking, and we are fortunate in our community to have Narcan, which is a support group for parents that have kids that are out there gunning and running. But we also have Compassionate Friends, and that's a support, grief, and loss. And so the Mat-Su Opioid Task Force is a connector. We try to connect people to services, and an array of services, both sides of the coin. And what we try to do is just provide that assistance. And again, providing hope in the air and having events, keeping the information in the forefront, keeping the data in the forefront. And the data is super, super important.
Well, thank you again so much, Michael. That is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank Michael for being here. The My House podcast is recorded at the My House studio in Wasilla, Alaska. Our producer and editor is myself, Isaac Smolden. And for Michelle Overstreet, I'm Isaac Smolden. Until next time.